Gear yourselves up. For the first time ever at any Indian university, an embassy column is happening at a college event. But indeed, this is SRCC Business Conclave, breaking records and providing all the curious young minds a global lens. For the embassy column today, we have with us Mr. Shingo Miyamoto and Mr. Federico Salas Lotfe. Mr. Shingo Miyamoto is a minister, head of the economic section at the Embassy of Japan in India, a dynamic personality who believes in peace and propagates the idea of peaceful, harmonious global existence. We are filled with immense pride and honor to have you here, sir. Let us begin with this session.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. My name is Shingo Miyamoto. I'm Minister for Economic and Development Affairs at the Japanese Embassy. It's a pleasure to be here today. May I start my presentation?
Yes, sir, surely.
Do I have control over this? Oh, yes, I do. Okay. Thank you very much. So I will share the screen. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very well. So thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to come and speak to you today. It's my pleasure. And what I will say today is not anything that's very complicated. I say this oftentimes when I have an opportunity to speak with my Indian friends. Maybe some of you might have heard me say the same things in the past, but let me begin. And my talk is about the relationship between Japan and India, which is obviously a very important one. I'm basically going to tell you what an important country India is for Japan, and also conversely, what an important country Japan is for India as well. So let me just go ahead and go into my presentation. The first part is that India is one of the most important countries for Japan, okay? So this graph shows, and I'm going to talk about the geopolitical aspect of it, or the strategic aspect of it. And as you can see in this graph, and it's written in Japanese, I'm sorry, but this graph depicts the number of intrusions by Chinese vessels into Japanese waters, or the adjacent waters of our territory, okay? And if you look at it, you can see that from around 2012, the number of intrusions have increased immensely. Okay, so this is like number of vessels that came is like, you know, in the high months, it's like 147. And then the number of vessels that came into Japanese territorial waters without obtaining Japan's permission is like anywhere between 10 to 20 or 30 times per month. Now, I think this would ring a bell in the minds of many of our Indian friends because you have similar things happening up north on your borders as well. So, and if you look at the military spending of the top 10 countries in the world, you see the United States, which is, you know, obviously at the very top, and then China comes second. And then everyone else from number 3 to number 10, including Japan and India, are more or less the same, you see. So when you see one of the two big guys, you know, coming into your borders like this, you have to make sure that, you know, you can maintain peace and stability in the region. And obviously, India and Japan are facing similar strategic conditions. So naturally, India would be a very important partner for Japan. My second point is the population structure of our countries. Now, if you look at the population pyramid of Japan to the far left of this slide, you can kind of see how astoundingly old the Japanese population is, okay? The pyramid is shaped such that the number of young people is decreasing and the number of older people is increasing. And I put this mark here where it says 29%. This is 65 and above, you see. So if you look at the entire population of Japan, 1/3 of everyone you see in Japan is over 65 years old. That's kind of amazing. Think about it. Now, if you look at the Indian population pyramid, it's shaped in a nice bell shape, and where here I marked 47%, which is below 24. Okay, which means that half of your population is 24 or younger. So what a big difference this is. And just as a reference, I have China on the right-hand side. So this shows a fundamental relationship of complementarity between Japan and India, because India has this population which is still growing and the biggest in the world, and people who have to go out and find jobs, not just in India, but around the world. On the other side, we have Japan, which is a well-developed economy, a shrinking population, and a lack of people who are in the age zone where people are able to work. So there's complementarity here. This is why India is important for Japan. And then lastly, I would argue that India is the last superpower of the world. Okay, this is I would say it's an argument, but I think it's also a fact. India is the only country in the world which has the caliber of becoming a superpower like the United States. So I've shown some graphs. Graph A here, it shows the top 11 most populous countries in the world. And you can see that China is #1, but India is #2, and it's growing, and it's going to overtake China as the most populous country in the world very soon. And then from #3 onwards, it's more or less the same, and Japan is #11 in terms of population. But if you look at this through the lens, oh, sorry, I have to go back one. Where did it go? Okay, here we go. Okay, so if we look at it through the lens of spending power, so per capita gross national income, US is #1, Japan is #2 among these 11 most populous countries of the world. And then India is somewhere down the list, okay? It's still pretty small here. This is the amount of, I guess, income that people have, an individual has to spend in that country. Now, if you multiply this A and B, you get the gross spending power of a country. And here, India is already above Japan because you have so many people, despite the fact that each individual does not have as much spending power as people do in Japan. If you aggregate it, India is already bigger than Japan. So just think about how big India would be or become when people in India have maybe half as much spending power as people do in Japan right now. Then, this bar for India would probably surpass Japan, US and China as well. So, India is a country with that amount of capacity. And obviously that makes India important for Japan. Now I'm going on to my second point of my talk, which is that Japan, I hope, is also one of the most important countries for India, okay? Now, this shows the amount of official development assistance that Japan does around the world, the left-hand side graph, okay? And Japan is one of the biggest development partners of the world, okay? We do about 1.44 trillion yen worth of development assistance to almost all countries in the world. But India receives 26% of the total, just one country. And there's, over 190 countries in the world. And India, one country, is the recipient of 1/4 or more of every single assistance or official development assistance that Japan does. This is really, really amazing in my mind, because there's so many countries in the world, and Japan is focusing so much on India. Now, this one on the right is seen from the Indian perspective. So India receives about $6 billion worth of external assistance in 1 year. Excuse me. And Japan does 40% or 41% of the total amount of external assistance that is received by India. And IDA, this is international development agencies like the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank, they do about 10%. And the number 3 donor for India is Germany, which does about 9%. And the rest is, coming from different partners, probably like the United States or the UK or I don't know which country. But the point is, Japan does 41% of every single project that's done in India by an external partner. This is, by far the biggest. So obviously, I hope that this fact makes Japan a pretty important partner for India. We are now financing about 6 metro projects in 6 metro big cities in India: Delhi, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, and also Kolkata. And we are also now building, together with the Indian partners, the first high-speed rail system in India, which will run from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. So these are just some of the projects that are included in that huge sum of assistance or cooperation that we do with India. Also, I wanted to point out that Japan is one of the biggest investors in India. We are number 1, 2, 3, 4 in this pie chart that I have. But if you look at the fact that the number 1 country and number 2 country are Singapore and Mauritius, these countries are more like investment hubs. So they're just channeling investment coming from companies from other countries to India through them. So there must be Japanese companies investing from Singapore to India, and so on and so forth. So if you count, just the countries that are not investment hubs per se, but big countries like the US or Japan, Japan is probably among the top 3 investors in India, the USA, Japan, and the Netherlands. And you know that there are many Japanese companies who are here in India producing stuff and even exporting from India to other countries, like including Africa. So Japan has a pretty big strength in terms of manufacturing. And this, I think, makes Japan a really important partner for India as well, because having these investments and companies coming from Japan and producing in India makes it possible, or helps at least, in India achieving its goal of make in India and also make for the world. I want to show you a little page from my Hindi textbook. Okay, this is the first chapter of my Hindi textbook, and this guy here is called Pratap, and he grew up in the UK, I think, in the UK, and he's coming to India to study Hindi, and he's meeting this lady. I think she is his host mother. Her name is Kamla, and her child is Raj. And Pratap asks Raj, he's pointing to this car, in this picture, and he says, "Kya ve gari Japani hai?" Like that. And Raj's answer is a little bit cute. He says, "Nahin, ve Japani nahin hai, ve Maruti hai." So that's the point. And this is a Hindi textbook, so I think it's the truth. Maruti is not a Japanese car, it's an Indian car. It's produced by a Japanese company using Japanese technology, but it's Indian. We are an indispensable partner in the Make in India initiative. Okay? So, This would be the happy end of my story. A, Japan is important for India. B, India is important for Japan. We're the biggest friends. Now, that would be a really happy ending. But I want us to kind of take a step backwards, like take ourselves out of India and out of Japan as well, and take a look at ourselves from the outside world. And you will find that this huge potential that exists between Japan and India is extremely underutilized. Okay, it's kind of astounding, but you will see. So, with us being such good friends and with so much investment coming to India from Japan, you would think that India would be one of Japan's biggest trading partners, right? But if you look at the top 20 export destinations of Japan on the left-hand side graph, US, China, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, Germany, Singapore, Vietnam, Australia, Indonesia, UK, Malaysia, Netherlands, and then India. Okay? Isn't this bar a little bit too low if we think about the potential that we have? And then if you look at Japan's top 20 import origins, it's also kind of like that. China is number one, US is number two. You have like 20 some countries. India is 27th, and it's a very small amount. Now, obviously, there's some improvements that's necessary here because considering the strategic partnership that we have and the size of the Indian economy and the potential of the Indian people and Indian industry, this should be much bigger. So that's one point. And then if you look at Japan's FDI, foreign direct investment, I did show you that in India, Japan is one of the biggest countries investing in India. But if you look at it from Japan's perspective, Japan's investment, most of it goes to the US, China, Singapore, and Thailand and Indonesia and Korea, okay? This is like the US takes about half of it, China takes about a little less than maybe 20% of it. India is taking only a small percentage of it. So if you look at the whole picture, not just sitting in India and being happy about how much investment we're getting already from Japan, but if you go outside and compare it with what other countries are getting, India is still very small. It's smaller than it should be, I think. Now, this is number of Japanese companies. We have about 1,500 companies in India, Japanese companies in India. That's a very big number. But if you compare it with other countries, China is much bigger. Other Asian countries, this includes countries like Indonesia and Thailand and Malaysia, is much bigger. The US is much bigger, and Europe is much bigger than India. This could also be much bigger in India, I think. Now, number of people living, or number of Japanese people living in India or visiting India even is much lower than other countries. Like number three in terms of living, number of people living in India. And if you compare it with other countries like the US or China or Indonesia even, it's much smaller. And visitors coming from Japan as well, it's number 29 in the world. Very small, very thin pie. See? So what I wanted to say here is why? Why is it like that? What can we do to change this? So here are some of my answers. I'm not sure if these are would be like the silver bullet for everything, but I think India does need to do a little more to achieve further improvements in the business environment here. It is a fact that under the current Modi administration, India's ease of doing business ranking has improved immensely. I think it's like 64 in the world right now. But even with that, companies that do business here are suffering a lot of times because the regulatory environment is not as stable. they tend to change the rules abruptly, which cause economic damage to companies. Sometimes they will have some component of their product that they have to import from Thailand, for instance. If you're making a Maruti Suzuki car in India, some of the components have to be imported from other places. But sometimes the Indian authorities impose rules saying, okay, from 2 weeks from now, you can't import this one from Thailand, you have to make it in India or something like that. Now, if something like that happens, it will cause a lot of damage to the operation of these companies because they have to figure out where they can get the components in order to keep producing. Now, this kind of thing, I think, has to be addressed in order for that potential that we were talking about in the beginning to be really made use of. Okay, and then I also think that the Indian manufacturing sector has to be subjected to more international competition. I will show you this in a graph afterwards, but unless the Indian companies start competing more on the international market, um, it will become increasingly difficult because you are talking about only competing within the limited market of India itself. India itself is huge. It's a world of its own. So any company can do business and make a huge profit only doing business just in India. I'm talking about the manufacturing sector, by the way, not the high tech, like IT sector, because this is a little bit different because there's no borders really. But manufacturing, you can manufacture only in India and sell in India and make a big profit. But if you look at that product and take it and look at it, compare it with some other product made in Thailand or Indonesia, is that product more competitive than the ones they make in Indonesia? That's the question. And because India tends to be too big of a market, people don't normally do that comparison here in India. But in order to compete in the global market, the important thing is that you take your product and look at it and compare it with some other product which is produced in other countries, and you need to maintain that competitive edge. And in order to do that, you have to subject yourself to the competition. I'm saying don't just stay in the Indian market, look at what people are doing outside. Now, and then also I'm saying India should look at the outside world and learn from other countries' experiences. Now, when I compare India's trade with Japan, for instance, those countries that had bigger trade values with Japan than India, like Malaysia or Taiwan or Indonesia, are these countries bigger than India? No, right? They're pretty tiny compared to India. It's like one state from India, I would say. So why is it that these countries who are the size of one of your states capable of producing so much goods and trading them so much with Japan to the extent that they would have more investment coming to these smaller countries than it would come to India? This is what you have to think about. And so I'm saying you should look to the outside world and compare yourselves with them. And where you can learn lessons from these countries, you should. Lastly, I'm saying that we should probably try to increase people-to-people exchange between our two countries. There is a language barrier. Japanese is, the spoken language in Japan. English is not as much spoken there. So I understand how people in India, when they think of studying overseas, they tend to go to countries like the UK, US, Australia, where you don't have this language barrier. But if you look at the kind of importance that we have with each other, I think more people should go to Japan to study, and then vice versa. More people should come from Japan to study in India. Not sure how I can achieve this or we can achieve this, but looking into the future, I definitely think that we need to have more people-to-people exchanges between our two countries. Because if you look at the number of Indians visiting Japan, it's about I would say 1% of the number of people who visit Japan from Korea, for instance. It's very small. It's almost negligible. So in looking into the future, I would like to see these things happen. Very lastly, do I still have time? Just 1 minute?
Yes, I surely.
So these are the India's trade data with countries, okay? And the red is imports, and blue is exports. So India, you see consistently, while trade is expanding, imports more from Japan than exports to Japan. Therefore, you have a deficit with Japan, like a persisting deficit. Now, this pattern is true from other countries as well, like Korea, Thailand, Germany, and Malaysia. You have a persisting deficit with these countries. Now, whereas if you look at other countries like UK, Singapore, and the US, you have a surplus. You see, you're exporting more to these countries than you're importing from them. Now, what is the difference in this pattern? I'm not really sure. I haven't done the full analysis yet, but my guess is that these countries, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Germany, and Malaysia, are typically countries that have a really strong manufacturing sector, like they produce cars or, electric appliances, everything. You can imagine how, all the cell phones now are coming from Korea or Taiwan. But most cars in the world are coming from Japan or Germany or Korea. Thailand and Malaysia are also production centers for industry coming from either Japan or Korea. So you can see that these countries that have a very strong manufacturing base, we're not more like a financial hub, but we're a manufacturing base. You tend to have a deficit with these countries, meaning probably that your manufacturing sector is not as competitive as those that exist in these countries. So back to what I was saying, you should probably do things to increase the productivity, competitiveness of your manufacturing sector, and you should learn from these countries that have done it already, and then you should expose yourselves to competition with other countries, more so in the future than what you do now. So that's my advice, small advice, and the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
I am truly amazed the way the session unfolded. Thinking about India-China relationship, our strong bilateral relationships and differences in geopolitical structures and demographic structures, and the answers to strengthen it, really brought substance to this discussion. The careful insights portrayed through graphical representation was unlike any other session that we've attended and was so informative. The reference to the venture story was really wonderful. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Miyamoto for taking time from his busy schedule and being a guiding light to the audience. SRCC Business Conclave is delighted to have a man of such great stature. We were really fortunate to witness your presence at this extravagant event. Once again, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for gracing this event. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I apologize for the mistake that Aditi made. It's Indian-Japanese relationship.
It's okay.
We really respect the relationship and got to learn a lot about it. So thank you so much for the very informative session, sir. It couldn't have been better. We got to learn a lot, and thank you so much. And we apologize for the mistake.
You're very welcome. So I should be leaving the session now. I'm not sure how to do that. Let's see. Okay, I'll figure out how to leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, I figured it out. Okay, thank you. Tata.
Thank you so much, sir.
With this, I introduce our next speaker, Mr. Federico Salas Lotfe. Mr. Federico Salas Lotfe is the ambassador of Mexico to India. He has held various positions, including advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and was assigned to the Embassy of Mexico in the United States of America. He was also the permanent representative of Mexico to the United Nations Organization for Education, Science, and Culture. He indeed has a truly remarkable persona. With a cheerful state of mind, let us welcome Sir and begin this session.
Hello, authorities, professors, and students from Sri Ram College of Commerce of the University of Delhi. I thank you very much for the kind invitation to address this prestigious audience. I would like to thank Professor Simitri Kaur, Principal of SRCC, and Yagya Kera, Panel Coordinator, for organizing this event. On behalf of the Government of Mexico, I would like to say in the first place that I wish success and long life to this Business Conclave 2021. Secondly, I would like to apologize that because of previous commitments, I cannot address this message directly, live, with you, but Mexico acknowledges the growing commerce and importance between our two countries, and is the reason why I'm addressing you today. I would like to talk a little bit then about the bilateral relationship between Mexico and India. I think one of the key questions that we have to ask ourselves is what role can Mexico and India play in making this a more equitable world? It's obvious that we have a long-standing relationship dating back to the 17th century, when there were the first contacts of trade across the Indo-Pacific. This is before the concept of Indo-Pacific even existed. In 1947, Mexico was the first Latin American country to recognize the independence of India. And in 1950, we were also the first Latin American country to establish diplomatic relations with India. So has been now a little bit over 70 years since we've had this diplomatic relations. Since 2007, our cooperation has been enhanced thanks to the fact that we now have what we call a privileged relationship. Our common bilateral goals, such as achieving social development and inclusion across the board, is something that is very distinctive in our respective foreign policies. We coordinate our positions in such groupings like the G20 and in the United Nations Security Council, where we are now both Mexico and India serving as non-permanent members for the biennium 2021-2022. Our voices are heard loud and clear in the international fora, and this is a very important thing that we continue to do. In terms of economics, I don't have to tell you that India is, not only the second most populated country in the world today and one of its biggest economy, and is bound to be the third largest economy by the end of this decade. India offers, of course, a market that is over 1.3 billion people. And Mexico, on the other hand, interestingly enough, is the gateway to 46 countries through 12 free trade agreements. And we have, through this network of free trade agreements, access to a market share also similar to the population of India, that is 1.3 billion people. We are complementary economies in many ways, who can tackle the pandemic and set a path for local, regional, and global economic recovery. Moreover, both of our countries nurture from a myriad of traditions and ancient civilizations, and Mexico is proud home of 35 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, while India has 38. We work, Mexico and India, for a more equitable world. Despite the economic crisis that has affected us in the past years, the bilateral trade between Mexico and India has grown considerably, and we have become the largest trading partner of India in Latin America, the second largest in the Americas, only after the United States, with trade amounting to over $10 billion in 2018. Despite the lack of connectivity, direct connectivity, the tourism, the people-to-people contact has also increased in pre-pandemic times, and we certainly hope that this will renew after we move beyond the present pandemic. Despite the distance that separates Mexico and India, both our countries are working in many projects, and let me single one out. Our scientists, for example, have been working from the stars to the land, from space cooperation to crop fertilization, and this is something that I think is very significant, that speaks a lot about the opportunities and the challenges, certainly, that we face together. Through the Indo-Pacific ties that I mentioned before, these ties are growing in the present time, and we are looking to see how we can continue to promote innovation that has a social perspective for the common good. We are therefore still, and have been for many decades, proud advocates of the developing world, and will continue to do so. It is once in a lifetime that we can imagine how to cooperate and achieve common objectives for humankind. During these unpredictable times and challenging times, our friendship has grown more than ever, and I think that is very significant. And I think it sets up the potential for all that we can do together as we move towards the future. I avail myself of this opportunity to thank SRCC for allowing me to give these brief remarks, to wish you all the success in this important event, and to invite you to continue to cooperate so that the bilateral relationship between India and Mexico continues to grow and prosper. All the best for the Business Conclave 2021. Viva Mexico, Viva India. Thank you very much.
I feel that we've ended with the session. We thank Sir for the ambrosia of knowledge he just shared with us. It is beyond comprehension the utter gratitude we feel within his presence. We are utterly grateful for the kind contribution Sir has made to this event by enlightening us with his great words. Thank you once again for joining us and bringing eminence to this platform. Thank you, everyone.